Micro-Reinventions, The Art of Quietly Becoming Someone New, written by Ronnie Rowland. Published by Growth Literacy Lounge. Not all beginnings feel like beginnings. Sometimes they arrive without announcement, no thunder, no spotlight. Just a subtle discomfort, a misalignment you can't quite name. The coffee tastes different. The routine feels heavier. You pause in the middle of a sentence, uncertain if the words you always use still belong to you. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. But it's real. This is how most transformations begin. Not with a crash, but with a crack. Small, barely visible, but enough to let light in. We're conditioned to believe that reinvention must be spectacular, new cities, bold declarations, life turned upside down in a single breath. But the truth is, real change is often quieter than that. It lives in the micro moments, the way you begin to question your habits, the way you choose stillness over speed, the way you turn toward what feels more like truth and away from what feels like survival. In one of her quieter insights, Brené Brown reminds us, courage starts with showing up and letting ourselves be seen. But sometimes, the first place you must show up is with yourself, before the world is ready, or before even you feel ready. Just a quiet willingness to be honest about who you are and who you're no longer pretending to be. This book is not about heroic overhauls. It's about micro-reinventions, the subtle, sacred shifts that reshape you without spectacle. The ones that feel invisible at first, but eventually change everything. It's about learning to trust the direction your spirit leans, even if you don't have words for it yet. You don't need to announce your transformation to the world, you need to honor it. Let these pages be a mirror, a space to pause, to notice, to choose. The self you're becoming is not far away. It's already here, asking for a little more room to breathe. You've already begun. Keep going. Quietly, or deliberately, unapologetically. Chapter 1. The Myth of the Grand Gesture. We are drawn to spectacle. The world teaches us to expect it, the roaring applause, the bold leap, the viral before and after. Somewhere along the way, we came to believe that transformation must be dramatic to be real. As if change needs an audience to count. But most lasting reinvention doesn't begin with a bang, it begins with a breath. Consider this: fireworks light up the sky for moments, then vanish into smoke, but a single candle, quietly lit, can burn through the night. It doesn't announce itself, it simply offers light, one quiet flicker at a time. True change, enduring change, is more candle than cannon. The myth of the grand gesture whispers to the weary soul, you're not ready yet. Wait until you can make it big, make it noticeable, make it final. And so we postpone our becoming. We wait for clarity, for certainty, for the perfect starting point wrapped in cosmic significance. But change doesn't come from waiting. It comes from movement, small, honest, human movement. Think of the body. Muscles don't strengthen from a single act of strain. They change from consistent, humble effort, repetition that no one claps for. The same is true of the self. The identity reshapes not from an epiphany alone, but from the quiet courage to act differently, again and again. We tell ourselves stories that will begin when the new year arrives, or when we move cities, when we land the job. But real reinvention rarely waits for milestone markers. It begins on an ordinary Tuesday when you choose tea over turmoil, when you step outside without your phone, when you pause instead of snapping. These are not grand gestures. They are micro-reinventions, and they are enough. The danger of chasing dramatic change is that it often demands more than we can sustain. It burns fast and bright, but leaves us tired, disoriented, and quietly ashamed when we return to our old rhythms. There's no shame in that. The system was flawed. We were set up to expect a storm when we needed a stream. So let us rewrite the story. Let us tell the truth about change. You don't need to disappear to a distant land. You don't need a viral declaration of your new self. You need one new choice. One altered pattern, one reimagined response. You need consistency over noise, depth over drama. Micro-reinvention is subtle, and that is its strength. It does not seek permission. It does not require applause. It lives in the tiny decision to speak more gently, to walk more slowly, to notice more often. These are the acts that stack into transformation, not instantly, but undeniably. You may not feel different today. But light a candle every night, and you begin to see in the dark. That's how it works. Small, repeated actions carve out new ways of being, not by force, but by faithfulness. So forget the myth of the grand gesture. Leave the fireworks to the fleeting. You are building something quieter, and far more durable. You are not performing change. You are inhabiting it, and that is where the real magic lives, in the decision no one sees but you. Transformation doesn't need to be loud to be lasting. Grand gestures often overwhelm, small changes endure. Micro-reinventions are not a lesser form of change, they are the foundation of it. What change have you postponed because it didn't feel big enough to matter? Choose one small behavior to shift today. Don't announce it, just begin. Chapter 2: Whispered Shifts. A dune does not rise in defiance of the wind. It yields, reshapes, reforms grain by grain. From a distance, it appears unchanged. But over time, the landscape is transformed. What once was flat becomes hill. What once was familiar becomes foreign, and no single gust can claim credit. This is how change often begins, as a whisper, not a command. We expect clarity to precede action, as if certainty were a precondition for courage. But in truth, clarity often arrives late. It follows the doing, not the deciding. Action, no matter how small, sends ripples through the self. It sets off a subtle chain reaction, where a single shift becomes an opening, and an opening becomes a path. Whispered shifts are those quiet adjustments you make without ceremony. You read a new kind of book, not because someone told you to, but because something in you hungers for it. You move your body differently. You stop chasing validation from the same place that keeps denying it. No one notices at first. But you do, and it's enough. These shifts don't ask for permission. They don't consult your 5-year plan. They emerge from instinct, from intuition, from the ache to become something more aligned. They feel, at first, like nothing. Like picking up your clothes instead of leaving them, like brushing your teeth before bed again, like saying no when it would be easier to say yes, but they matter. Because every action is a vote, not for who you've been, but for who you're becoming. We tend to overvalue the visible and undervalue the intimate. A promotion is celebrated. A new apartment, noticed. But the decision to sit with discomfort instead of escaping it? The choice to forgive yourself on a random Thursday morning? These are the kinds of changes that shift the tectonics of identity. Silently. Powerfully. You are already changing. Even now. Think back to a moment when something inside you no longer fit. Not a crisis, just a subtle dissonance, a restlessness. You didn't scream, you didn't declare a new life. You simply started to behave differently, slowly, deliberately. That was not a random phase, that was you responding to a deeper truth. We often fail to honor these early movements. We dismiss them as coincidences or quirks. But they are signals, whispered invitations to evolve. The key is to listen before the noise of life drowns them out. Begin to notice. Notice the moments when you choose differently, even slightly, when you pause before reacting, when you speak more honestly, when you stop shrinking to make others comfortable. These shifts matter. They may not change your surroundings overnight, but they reshape your inner architecture. And eventually, the outer must follow the inner. You don't need a blueprint, you need awareness. You need to trust that the quiet nudge you feel is not random, it's rooted, it's real. And when it comes, act. Act without drama, act without needing applause. Act without demanding certainty. Because whispered shifts are not made for the stage, they are made for the soul. This is the quiet revolution. It won't trend. It won't be loud. But it will be yours, entirely, and that makes it sacred. Change begins with unnoticed shifts, not grand strategies. Every small decision is a vote for who you're becoming. Trust your quiet instincts. They often know before you do. What subtle shifts have you made lately that felt small but meaningful? Choose one quiet change you've been feeling. Follow it today, without needing anyone to notice. Chapter 3: The Mosaic of the Self. Imagine a mosaic, thousands of tiny tiles arranged into a portrait. From a distance, it looks seamless. But up close you see the fragments, each a sliver of color, a story, a moment, a choice. None of them matter alone, but together they create identity. This is who you are, not a fixed image, not a single definition, but a living mosaic, one tile at a time. We are taught to think of identity as solid, like a statue carved once and left to endure. But identity is not marble, it's not unchangeable. It is crafted from the quiet layering of habits, thoughts, responses, and reflections. The way you speak when no one's listening, the way you carry silence, the way you look at yourself in mirrors that don't flatter. These moments aren't minor, they are the very material of who you are becoming. Too often, we fear that change requires demolishing the whole picture. That to reinvent ourselves, we must destroy what was, but that is neither wise nor necessary. The art is not in smashing. The art is in swapping a single tile. You don't need to erase your story, you need to update the pieces. One tile could be a habit, the morning scroll that leaves your spirit frayed. Replace it with breath, or stillness, or words worth reading. Another tile might be a reaction, the quick anger you've carried like armor. Replace it with a pause, a breath, a question. Another may be a belief that your worth is measured by productivity. Replace it with presence. 5 tiles replaced do not change the whole picture, not at first. But they alter the direction. They shift the tone, and that shift compounds. This is the quiet method of micro-reinvention, not tearing down, but tilting forward, one tile, then another. The beauty of this metaphor is that it removes pressure. You don't need to be finished. You don't need to have a grand design. You only need to ask, which piece no longer fits, and which piece do I need instead? This mosaic is yours to rework, and the process never ends. At times it will feel subtle, imperceptible, as if you're rearranging pieces in the dark, but then, one day you will see yourself clearly, and realize the entire composition has shifted. It's not about speed, it's about depth, or about intention. Begin by noticing. Notice the places where your current habits don't honor your future self. Notice the thoughts that replay like worn-out records. Notice the versions of you that still belong to old stories. Then, gently begin to replace. One act, one word, one belief. You are not betraying the past by changing. You are honoring the future. This process is sacred. It does not need to be shared. It does not need to be named. Let others call it a phase. Let them misunderstand. You are not assembling yourself for their view. You are building wholeness for your own. And that work, the inner reshaping, the quiet editing of who you are, is the truest kind of art. Because what is a mosaic, if not the proof that broken things can be made beautiful again? Your identity is a mosaic, made of many small, editable parts. You don't need to rebuild from scratch. You need to replace one tile at a time. Change is an art of gentle reassembly, not violent erasure. What one tile in your identity no longer fits the self you're becoming? Replace one habit, thought, or belief today, not loudly, but with quiet intention. Chapter 4. Identity without announcement. A seed does not announce its intention to grow. It does not issue a statement, gather witnesses, or seek affirmation. It simply sinks into the soil and begins, quietly, invisibly, and still it becomes. We live in an age that glorifies visibility. Reinvention, we're told, must be shared to be valid. Boast the progress. Proclaim the change, curate the evidence of becoming. But not all growth wants to be seen. Some of it asks only to be honored. Identity without announcement is not secrecy. It is sanctity. It is the recognition that some changes lose their power when performed. The deepest transformations are those that take root far below the surface. No applause, no caption. Just the sacred work of becoming. The pressure to declare a new self is subtle, but relentless. It creeps in through well-meaning advice and cultural cues. Reinvent yourself. But make sure everyone knows, as if the transformation isn't real unless it's witnessed. But performance is not proof, and validation is not evidence. You do not owe the world an explanation for your evolution. The most profound changes often happen in solitude. The way you speak more gently to yourself. The way you stay present in conversations without checking your phone. The way you begin to leave toxic spaces before they devour your energy. No one sees these shifts, but they shape everything. There is freedom in letting your growth remain your own, in not needing to justify your softness, in not asking for permission to be new. You are allowed to become without broadcasting it. This doesn't mean you hide. It means you choose your audience with care. Not everyone is meant to witness your roots stretching deeper. Not every space is safe for sacred change. Some people only recognize who you were. They will resist the unfamiliar. That is not your burden to carry. Let them catch up later, or not at all. Reinvention is not a performance. It is a realignment. And sometimes the most honest thing you can do is change in silence. There will be moments when the urge to announce arises, not from joy, but from fear. The fear that your transformation won't count unless someone else sees it. But the truth is, the most undeniable changes are the ones that speak for themselves, in time. Not because you told anyone, but because the way you move, speak, choose, and live becomes unmistakably different. Let your identity unfold the way nature does, without spectacle. Without strategy, just a quiet unfolding. A leaf turning toward light, a river deepening its course. To become someone new is not a betrayal of who you were, it is a continuation. A deeper truth. And it does not need a platform, it needs space, it needs silence. It needs you. So trust the quiet. You are allowed to grow without being seen, to evolve without explanation, to rise without a witness. And in doing so, you reclaim something rare, the dignity of private transformation. Not all growth needs to be shared. Sacred transformation often begins in silence. You don't need to justify or explain your becoming. Let your identity evolve privately. Your presence will speak louder than any post. Where in your life are you tempted to perform your growth for validation? Choose one personal shift to protect today. Resist the urge to share it. Let it remain yours. Chapter 5: Sacred Boredom and the Space to Change. A field cannot bloom year-round. There are seasons when it must lie fallow, undisturbed, empty, waiting. On the surface it seems like nothing is happening. But beneath the soil, restoration is taking place. Nutrients are returning. The earth is preparing. This is sacred boredom. In a culture obsessed with momentum, stillness feels like failure. We are conditioned to fill every moment, scrolling, swiping, planning, performing. Emptiness becomes intolerable. But boredom is not the enemy of growth. It is the space where reinvention begins. When the mind is not occupied, it starts to listen. Old thoughts resurface. Unprocessed emotions speak. Hidden desires reveal themselves. In boredom, the noise lowers, and beneath it, the quiet voice of your next self starts to emerge. We often mistake boredom for laziness. We feel guilty for resting, for pausing, for not maximizing every second. But a life constantly filled leaves no room for revision. Change requires space. Space requires stillness, and stillness often arrives dressed as boredom. The discomfort is the point. To sit with yourself in silence is to enter a dialogue with the parts of you that don't often get airtime. The parts that whisper instead of shout. The parts that aren't efficient, but are essential. Sacred boredom is the moment when the self you're becoming taps gently on your shoulder, asking to be noticed. You won't find that self in the feed, the inbox, the algorithm. You'll find it in the moments between. The space before the next thing begins. Reinvention is not just doing new things, it's unlearning old patterns. And an unlearning takes time. Time that doesn't look productive. Time that feels empty. But that emptiness is fertile. Let yourself be bored. Let yourself wander, not with a goal, but with openness. Go for a walk without a podcast. Sit on your couch without your phone. Let your thoughts meander. Let them bore you, and then, notice what they reveal. Often what rises in boredom is not distraction, but desire, a longing to write, to move, to change direction. These are not random whims. They are signals, not urgent but undeniable. The world won't reward you for your stillness, but your soul will. Creating this space isn't easy. It requires boundaries. Say no to the endless scroll. Say yes to the stretch of quiet. Protect it like sacred ground. You may not feel anything profound the first time, or the fifth. But something will start to shift, the sediment will settle, the water will clear, and in that clarity, you'll begin to see what you truly want, who you truly are, what no longer fits, what might be ready to begin. Boredom isn't a pause in your evolution. It is the soft opening. Let it be awkward, let it be slow. Let it be quiet enough to hear yourself think. And then, let yourself listen. Stillness is not stagnation, it's preparation. Sacred boredom creates the space where reinvention can begin. Your next self often arrives in the silence, not the noise. Where have you filled your life so tightly that change has no room to enter? Schedule 10 uninterrupted minutes today to do nothing. Let the boredom arrive, and stay long enough to hear what it has to say. Chapter 6: Unseen Choices, Unshakable Change. A ship changes direction not by spinning in circles, but by turning its rudder just slightly. That small, nearly invisible movement, held steadily over time, can carry it into an entirely new ocean. Reinvention works the same way. It isn't dramatic, it's directional. We often underestimate the power of the choices we make when no one's watching. The decision to wake up 5 minutes earlier, to leave a room that drains your energy, to speak one truth instead of many justifications, these acts seem too small to matter. But they do. They're rudder turns, they shape the journey. The myth is that change must be massive to be meaningful, but the truth is that it only needs to be consistent. Repetition is what makes a path where there wasn't one, and the path doesn't have to be perfect, it only has to be walked. Every day offers choices that either confirm who you've been or who you're becoming. Some are loud, quitting a job, ending a relationship, but most are quiet. The food you reach for, the tone you choose in conflict, the impulse you resist. These moments are not filler, they are formation. Small choices, compounded, become identity, not all at once. Not with fanfare, but steadily. You become what you choose, especially when no one is there to applaud or correct you. The beauty of micro-reinvention is that it works with what you already have. You don't need more resources. You don't need a 5-year plan. You need presence. The awareness to see the fork in the road, even when it looks like nothing at all. Consider how many times a day you stand at that fork, between reacting and responding, between scrolling and reflecting, between rushing and resting. Most of these decisions won't make headlines, but together, they form a headline your life will quietly live out. The shift comes when you stop asking, "What big thing can I do to change?" and start asking, "What small choice can I repeat that aligns with who I want to be?" The answer is rarely exciting, but it is effective. There is a kind of power in mastering the invisible, in knowing that no one has to see your growth for it to be real, that your life is being reshaped in the tiny, stubborn ways you keep showing up differently. Let that be enough. 3 small choices a day can change a life. Choose to speak truth even when silence is safer. Choose to move your body even when your mind resists. Choose to pause before reacting, even when anger feels earned. These aren't grand gestures, but they are anchors. They keep your rudder steady. They keep you moving towards something new. And some days, that's all that matters. You don't need to leap. You need to lean, slightly, intentionally, again and again. That's how the course is changed. Not by force, but by quiet repetition. Not by spectacle, but by sovereignty. You are the captain, you hold the wheel, and every small choice is a turn. Small, repeated choices carry more power than infrequent, dramatic ones. Your direction is shaped by the invisible decisions you make daily. You don't need to overhaul your life, just turn the rudder and keep turning. What recurring choice in your day is shaping you more than you realize? Identify one micro-choice you can repeat daily. Commit to it this week, no matter how small it feels. Chapter 7: The Pause That Rewrites You. A song without silence is noise. The rests between the notes matter as much as the notes themselves. They create rhythm. They allow emotion. They give meaning. And so it is with life. The pause is not the absence of action, it is the shaping of it. We are taught to act quickly, decide fast, respond instantly. Speed is praised, hesitation is shamed. But reaction is not always wisdom. Often, it is programming. And programming, left unchallenged, becomes a cage. The pause is the key that unlocks the cage. In the split second before you reply, before you lash out, before you retreat, there is a space. That space is small but sovereign. It is the place where you get to choose again, not from habit, but from awareness, not from fear, but from clarity. This moment is the heartbeat of micro-reinvention. It doesn't look impressive. It won't be documented or applauded, but pausing is a radical act in a reactive world. It says, "I will not be ruled by momentum. I will not outsource my identity to old instincts. The pause allows you to rewrite your response, and in doing so, rewrite yourself. Think of a time you caught yourself just in time. You wanted to snap, to flee, to prove, to defend, but you breathed instead. You delayed, and in that delay, something softened. You saw yourself more clearly. You moved differently. That moment wasn't just restraint, it was reinvention. Pausing isn't passive. It is a choice, and choosing is where transformation begins. When you learn to pause, you stop being a product of your past. You start being a participant in your future. You begin to notice the gaps where automatic reactions once lived. In those gaps, you plant seeds of who you want to become. It doesn't take long. Just a breath, a blink, a beat. But it must be practiced, because the world won't encourage it. The world will rush you, provoke you, dare you to react, but you are not obligated to perform. Let the provocation pass. Let the old urge rise and fall. In that silence, you are doing something brave, not becoming who you've always been. Over time, the pause grows. It stretches from seconds into patterns, from isolated moments into your default rhythm. You begin to live from presence, not programming. You stop being driven by impulse and start being shaped by intention. This is not easy, especially at first. The pause can feel awkward, like a missed cue. It can feel vulnerable, like laying down your armor. But that discomfort is proof that you're shifting, that the old grooves are giving way to new ones. Honor that discomfort. Let it teach you. Because the more you pause, the more you see. The more you see, the more you choose. And the more you choose, the more you become. One breath at a time. The pause between impulse and action is where transformation begins. Reactivity is programming, pausing is power. You rewrite who you are by choosing how you respond. Where in your life are you reacting out of habit instead of choosing with awareness? Today, when you feel the urge to react, pause for 5 seconds. Breathe. Then respond from the self you're becoming. Chapter 8. Becoming without permission. A wildflower does not wait for the gardener's approval before it blooms. It finds its own way through cracked stone and shaded soil. It grows because it must. Not because someone asked it to, not because it was told it was ready, but because it knew. You too can grow without permission. From a young age, we are taught to seek validation, ask if it's okay to want more, to feel differently, to become someone new. We look for signs, for support, for someone to say, yes, now you may begin. But the truth is, no one can grant you permission to be who you already are. Reinvention begins the moment you stop asking. Waiting for approval often disguises itself as patience, but it's fear wearing a mask. Fear that becoming will cost you belonging, fear that changing will confuse the people who only know your past. And so you hesitate. You delay. You shrink into the shape that feels familiar, even if it no longer fits. But there is a quiet liberation in no longer needing to be understood. Not every version of you will make sense to the ones around you. Not every growth will be convenient. Some will unsettle those who preferred your former self. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. You are allowed to outgrow the life that once fit. The truth is, people will project their limits onto you. They will question the new habits, the softer voice, the sudden silence. Not because you're wrong, but because you are reflecting back the changes they've postponed in themselves. Let that be their mirror, not your muzzle. You do not need to explain your blooming. There will be days when you doubt the shift, when you feel the pull of the old rhythm. When it would be easier to revert than to rise. On those days, remind yourself, becoming is not always glamorous. Often it is lonely, quiet, and uncomfortable. But discomfort is not a sign to turn back. It is the cost of entry into a fuller self. You are allowed to change without consensus. This doesn't mean you reject community or wisdom. It means you stop outsourcing your selfhood. You listen inward before you look outward. You trust the knowing that stirs beneath logic. The part of you that whispers, there's more than this, because there is. And you are allowed to want it. You don't have to burn bridges. You don't have to shout. You can simply step away from the roles that no longer hold you. You can edit your life without making a public case. You can move quietly toward alignment. Permission is an illusion. Reinvention is an invitation. So write the poem before someone calls you a poet. Begin the walk before someone says you're ready. Speak the truth even if your voice is unsure. Start living as the person you've long imagined, without needing anyone to confirm she exists. You are not waiting to become. You are remembering who you've always been beneath the noise. You don't need permission to grow. Becoming is your birthright. Approval is not a prerequisite for transformation. Let others adjust or misunderstand. Your becoming is not theirs to manage. What part of your becoming have you delayed while waiting for someone else to validate it? Do one thing today that reflects who you're becoming, without asking, announcing, or justifying it. Chapter 9. The Geography of Stillness. There are places on the map where silence lives: a forest before dawn, a desert under moonlight, a stretch of ocean where the wind forgets to move. In these places, time slows, the world hushes, and something essential begins to speak. Stillness is not empty, it is full of what we usually miss. We spend much of our lives in motion, moving faster, speaking louder, filling the space with tasks, talk, and noise. Stillness feels unnatural, even dangerous. It asks us to be with ourselves, unshielded. It strips away the roles and reveals the rawness beneath. But within that rawness lies something rare: the truth of who we are becoming. Without stillness, reinvention becomes mimicry. We react, copy, perform. But when we stop, truly stop, we make space for originality, for clarity, for the internal shift that cannot happen while sprinting. Stillness is not retreat, it is return to breath, return to presence, return to the parts of ourselves that don't raise their voices but carry the most weight. It is in stillness that we notice what no longer fits, what we've been holding that isn't ours, what we desire but have not named. Stillness is geography. You must go there on purpose. You don't stumble into stillness. You enter it, sometimes with resistance, often with discomfort, but eventually with reverence. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. The pace of modern life demands urgency. But urgency is rarely wise. It rushes past insight, it prioritizes speed over substance, and in that race, reinvention is flattened into performance. But you are not a brand. You are not content. You are becoming. Stillness reminds you of that. In quiet, you meet the self you've been outrunning. You sit with your unmet needs, your unspoken truths, your unexplored wants. At first, this can feel like drowning, but stay long enough, and it becomes floating. You begin to feel your own depth, and from that depth, direction emerges. This is not about meditating on a mountaintop. It's about carving moments into your ordinary days that allow the noise to settle. A walk without headphones, a morning without screens, a night without multitasking. These are not luxuries, they are lifelines. Stillness is not the absence of movement, it is the presence of attention. And attention, when sustained, becomes transformation. You begin to notice how often you escape yourself, how quickly you fill the pause, how rarely you listen, not to others, but to the quiet voice within. That voice doesn't shout, it nudges, it suggests, it invites. Let it. Go to the geography of stillness, not to solve, but to see, not to plan, but to remember. Reinvention does not require frenzy. It requires fidelity to your inner knowing, to the slow becoming, to the sacred hush of your own presence. And once you've touched that silence, you'll carry it with you, even into noise. Especially into noise, because stillness is not just a place. It becomes a posture, and from that posture, everything shifts. Stillness is not a void, it's a vessel for self-clarity and reinvention. You must choose stillness, it doesn't happen by accident. Attention creates transformation more reliably than effort alone. Where can you create a pocket of stillness in your day, space to simply be with yourself? Spend 15 quiet minutes today, without distractions. Listen to what rises when nothing else is speaking. Chapter 10. Letting go of the old script. Every life is built on a script. Lines inherited, roles accepted, scenes repeated. Some were written for us before we could speak. Others we volunteered for out of survival or hope. Over time, these scripts become invisible. We mistake them for identity. But not every script deserves a second act. To reinvent yourself, you must be willing to put the script down. Letting go does not mean erasing the past. It means no longer letting it dictate the future. It means recognizing which parts of your life are habits of identity, rather than expressions of truth. The way you shrink in conversations, the way you say yes when you mean no, the way you carry burdens that no longer belong to you. These are lines you've rehearsed. But they are not requirements. You are not obligated to play the same role forever. Often the hardest part of change is not stepping into the new, it's releasing the old. Even when the old is painful, it's familiar. It offers predictability, certainty, a sense of who you are, even if that self is misaligned. But comfort is not the same as truth. And certainty is not the same as peace. The old script may have served you once, it may have kept you safe, helped you survive, given you structure in chaos. Honor that, but don't confuse usefulness with permanence. A life preserver is meant for the storm, not for the shore. The page must turn. Letting go requires grief. Not every part of your former self will be easy to release. Some identities come wrapped in praise, some roles bring applause. But applause is not the same as authenticity. Reinvention demands a deeper allegiance, not to who others expect you to be, but to who you actually are becoming. There is quiet courage in refusing to recite the lines that no longer fit your voice. This doesn't require drama. You don't have to burn bridges or make declarations. Letting go can be subtle. A new boundary drawn. A routine changed. A silence kept where you once explained yourself. These acts may go unnoticed by others, but they echo loudly in the soul. The old script will call you back. It will offer you its rhythm. It will tempt you with the safety of the known. But every time you resist, even briefly, you write a new line, you build a new pattern. You start to live from the inside out, not the outside in. And slowly, the new story takes shape, a story where you speak truth without fear, where you rest without guilt, where you exist without justification, where your worth is no longer tied to performance or pleasing or pretending. This story isn't flashy. It may not look impressive, but it will feel like exhale. Letting go is not giving up, it's growing up, outgrowing, releasing, returning. To what? For yourself. Before the scripts. Before the roles. Before the noise. You are not what you were handed. You are what you choose. So put down the old lines. You don't have to finish the act. You are allowed to exit the scene. Quietly, decisively, authentically. And in that pause, begin again. Not every script you followed still serves your becoming. Letting go isn't betrayal, it's a return to truth. New identity begins with choosing not to repeat the old performance. What role or routine are you still playing that no longer aligns with who you are becoming? Name one part of your old script you're ready to release. Today, act as if that line no longer belongs to you. Chapter 11: Daily Rituals, Tiny Revolutions. The sunrise does not shout. It arrives in slow increments, touching everything gently before it is fully seen. And yet, by the time the world is awake, everything is changed. This is the power of ritual, subtle, consistent, transformational. We underestimate repetition. It seems boring, uninspired, too simple to matter, but what you do daily becomes who you are. A ritual is not a task. It is a vote, a small, deliberate act of becoming. Rituals are the architecture of identity. They do not need incense or ceremony. They do not require perfect conditions. In fact, the most powerful ones are quiet and ordinary. A morning walk. A journal opened before the day begins. A breath taken before answering. A glass of water savored instead of rushed. These small acts carry great weight, not because they are grand, but because they are chosen again and again. Consistency is often mistaken for limitation, but in truth, it is liberation. When you commit to a ritual, you relieve yourself of constant decision-making. You stop negotiating with resistance. You make becoming a rhythm instead of a struggle. And over time, rhythm becomes revelation. Each time you return to a ritual, you reinforce a message. This is who I am becoming. Not in theory, in practice. You anchor your values in motion. You tie your ideals to behavior, and behavior shapes belief. There is no such thing as a neutral habit. Everything you repeat either reinforces the past or constructs the future. Every day you are rehearsing your becoming. This is why rituals matter. They don't need to be impressive. They need to be true. A ritual should feel like a return, not a performance. It should restore something within you, however small. It should echo your inner landscape, not someone else's checklist. The world moves fast. Rituals slow you down. not to delay, but to deepen, and to remind you that life is not an emergency, that you are not a machine, that growth, real growth, is not measured in how much you do, but in how intentionally you do it. Micro-Reinvention is powered by ritual, not as obligation, but as invitation. You do not have to change everything at once. You only need to choose one ritual that aligns with the self you're becoming, and return to it daily. It can be as simple as writing down one thing you're grateful for, as ordinary as taking a walk without your phone, as humble as lighting a candle at night and letting the flame mark the end of your day. These tiny revolutions don't shout, but they build. Day by day, they create a foundation that holds the weight of who you are becoming. And when you miss a day, which you will, you don't start over, you return. Rituals are not about perfection, they are about presence. About choosing again, about aligning your feet with your future, even after you've stumbled. Let your rituals be sacred, even if they are simple. In a world that demands the spectacular, dare to choose the steady, because the self you long to become isn't waiting at the end of a dramatic moment. It is waiting in the rhythm of your days. Rituals are consistent actions that shape identity over time. What you repeat daily becomes your most honest expression of self. Tiny, truthful habits are more powerful than occasional inspiration. What daily ritual would best reflect the self you are quietly becoming? Begin one small ritual today, just one. Repeat it tomorrow. Let it become your quiet revolution. Chapter 12. The Self That Emerges. A sculpture does not become itself through addition, but through removal. The artist sees what is already there, hidden inside the stone, and carves away the excess, but not all at once. Not with haste, but with trust in what waits beneath. This is how the self emerges, quietly, precisely, inevitably. We imagine transformation as a leap, but it is more often a slow reveal, a noticing, a return. You have not built a new self from scratch. You have uncovered a deeper one. Each micro-reinvention, each pause, each ritual, each choice, was not an escape from who you were, but a movement toward who you've always been. The becoming was never about performance. It was about alignment. There is no single moment when you arrive, no clear line between the old and the new. One day you simply wake up and realize something has shifted. You respond differently. You carry yourself with quieter certainty. You feel less rushed, more rooted. This is not an accident. It is the result of every small, faithful decision you made when no one was watching. Transformation is often invisible until it isn't. People may not notice at first, or ever. They may expect the old lines, the old rhythms. That's okay. Let them catch up, or let them fall away. You do not need their recognition to be real. You are not becoming for them. You are becoming for yourself. There is a kind of peace that comes when you stop trying to prove your evolution, when you no longer feel the need to name every shift or justify every choice. The new self doesn't demand attention, it simply lives differently. And in that difference, everything changes. What emerges is not a brand, not a product, not a curated persona. What emerges is presence, clarity, integrity, a life that feels coherent from the inside out, and that coherence is the gift. The path of micro-reinvention does not promise perfection. It invites participation. It says, you do not need to leap, you need to listen. You need to notice the old patterns, the hidden scripts, the quiet longings, and meet them with new choices, one at a time. In doing so, you carve, you shape, you release what no longer belongs. And what remains is something truer. This self is not static, it will continue to shift. Reinvention does not end here. But it becomes gentler, less about fixing, more about refining, less about striving, more about settling into the truth. You don't have to start over. You have already begun. You have paused when it was easier to react. You have chosen stillness when the world demanded speed. You have let go of roles that no longer fit, even when they brought applause. You have changed your rituals, your roots, your rhythms, and in doing so, you have rewritten your identity, without ever needing to declare it. This is the quiet miracle of becoming, not announced, not awarded, just lived. And now as you look back you will see it clearly, not the noise, but the thread that wove it all together. Not the drama, but the direction, not the spectacle, but the substance. This is who you are now. Not because someone said so, but because you chose it. Again, and again, and again. True transformation reveals who you've always been beneath the noise. Micro-reinventions accumulate into lasting identity, not through spectacle, but consistency. The self that emerges is not invented, it is remembered. What evidence can you see today that you have already begun to quietly transform? Honor your journey by continuing one micro-reinvention, without pressure, without noise, just devotion. Take care and be well.